Hare Krishna. Can you please make me the host and Radha Pramod Prabhu also the host role? Yeah. Okay. Can you hear my voice? Am I audible? Okay. Thank you. नमो विष्णुपदाय कृष्णप्रेष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदांत स्वामिन्ति नामिने नमस्ते सारस्वती गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्य देशतारिणे जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवासादि गौर भक्त वृंदा हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्णा. So thank you all very much for joining today's session. So we have been discussing from this book Bhakti Aloka by Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, which is a collection of 12 essays on the 6 favorable and 6 unfavorable things on the path of devotional service, based on the second and third verse of Shri Upadeshamrita by Srila Rupa Goswami. So we have completed discussing about Atyahara and Prayasa, and we are in the process of discussing the third obstacle, which is Prajalpa. So last 2 weeks, I think we have been discussing on this theme of Prajalpa. So I would request Radha Pramod Prabhu to do a overview, and then we will continue our discussion. Over to you, Prabhu. Thank you.
हरे कृष्ण. ओम अज्ञानतिमिरान्धस्य ज्ञानाञ्जनशलाकया चक्षुरुन्मीलितं येन तस्मै श्री गुरवे नमः. Hare Krishna. So we are discussing on the subject of useless talk. So this is from last to previous week. So where we discussed what is examples of useless talks. So they are seemingly harmless talk sometimes. Example like what is your opinion, Ayurveda, allopathy, etc. And some parties or some certain movies which came now, and there are news which has useless talk must be read only if it contains topic about pure devotees. And reading novels, this is also useless talks. Novels with a story like that of Puranjana in the Srimad Bhagavatam, that are allowed. Then what is expected of a sadhaka? Practicing devotee should discuss topics of Lord Hari in the association of other devotees and remember Hari's name, form, qualities and pastimes in a secluded place without uselessly wasting time. So this is what is the instruction given. Machita Madgata Prana Bodhenta Parasparam Katentascha Mam Nityam Tushyanti Chara and also Satatam Kirtayantoma. So Nityam, Satatam, Nitya Yukta. All the three words in script, it should be constantly done. So at the very least, it should not be broken with some useless talk. So if they spend their days and nights uselessly talking, then the Lord's instruction, Nityam Satatam Nitya Yukta, always chanting my glories, will not be followed. That means we are not following the instruction of Lord. Then sadhaka must never justify his wrongdoings. So if we are not able to do it, then what should be our state? It's not that, okay, not able to practice devotional service constantly because of inability is anything wrong. We should repent for it. This should be the attitude. But at least we should not purposely do. We should not plan to watch news for 1 hour every day and keep some time pass time in schedule. Okay, 2 hours I read chanting, I did 1 hour Bhagavatam, I read 1 hour Bhagavatam, I heard. Now I am free, I can do some other things, some time pass. So we should not plan like that. And we should not have immediate capacity to give up. We may not have immediate capacity to give up useless talk, but we should not think it is okay. Oh, without prajalpa a little bit is must only. We should not justify that. And then last week we discussed this Prajalpa. There are 8 categories: useless talks, arguments, gossip, debates, fault finding in others, speaking falsehoods, blaspheming talks, and worldly talks. Then we discussed each one. First is arguments. Arguments, when one party want to establish its superiority and prove that they are right. So this is what the argument starts with, when we want to establish our superiority. And simply godless quarrel, this is also arguments only. So what is the effects of this argument? Bhaktivinoda Thakur says it's loss of mental strength. So we may have, as we have physical strength, we also have a mental strength. The strength of the mind gets wasted because of arguments. Person feel drained, person feel little weak after that, and it leads to restlessness. Because if the mind is restless, how can he perform devotional service? Because always it is thinking of how to prove my point, how to prove my point. So it is in a restless mood because we want to prove ourselves. So in that restlessness, we will not be able to perform devotional service, and devotional service requires concentration and peaceful mind. Also, heart becomes hardened. The natural state of the heart is it should be very soft, and it should feel compassion and generosity and all. But because of this, what happens? In its the heart which is soft, it will flow towards Krishna. But by argument, our heart becomes very harder and harder. So arguments are born out of intense selfish attitude, whereas bhakti should lead to selflessness. And also, natural discretion of the jivas changes. So the natural value system of jiva is anukulyasya sankalpo pratikulyasya varjanam. But by engaging arguments, what happens? Our natural discretion changes. Then we will do based on some whimsical thing, whimsical mind. And give up assembly where useless arguments takes place. This is a way to avoid it. Also, further it is said, should we stop? Okay, now I should not do any prajalpa. So should I stop completely all conversations? No, no, no. What is the instruction? We should converse on Dashamol instructions. So this Mulai made by Bhaktivinoda Thakur. This is you should better converse on them. So what are the 10 instructions? First is Shastras are the ultimate pramana. They contain knowledge about Sambandha, Vidya and Prajana. So these are the topics for our discussion should be. We should discuss on the Shastras. And within the Shastras also, these are the topics that are given. We should have discussion. Krishna is the absolute truth. He is the Sarva Shaktiman. Then Akila Rasamritamurti. And Jivas are marginal potency. And those who take shelter of Maya are called Nitya Baddhas. Those who take shelter of internal potency are called Nitya Siddhas. Krishna and his energies are both different and identical to him. So here, Achintya Bheda Bheda Tattva. Then after that, there is Abhideya Tattva, pure devotional service, and Parayojana Tattva, Prema. So these should be the topics of discussion if somebody want to have any discussions. Not that he should completely give up talking. And then there are favorable arguments. What is this favorable argument? Discussions on the conclusions of Srimad Bhagavatam. So discussions to establish the knowledge of one's relationship with Lord and are not prajalpa. So when we are having discussions, even if there is any discussions that may not be looks like a debate, but it is for establishing the conclusion, so it should be considered favorable. Also, Ateva Bhagavata Karaha Vichar. So Chaitanya Charitamrita in Madhya, we should study Bhagavatam very scrutinizingly. So scrutiny means it will involve some discussion. So then there will be some discussions among people. So this is actually what is favorable. And the source of arguments, we should see, if we are doing any argument, we should ask ourselves certain questions. What is that motivating me for this argument? Why am I arguing? So we should ask, am I arguing because of envy or pride, of aversion or attachment to sense gratification, or of foolishness? So I am quarrelsome and take pleasure in arguing with others. So this, if any of these reasons, then we should understand it is useless talks. It is unwanted arguments. And then there is gossip. So talking without reason about others, this is considered gossip. Any person we should not talk about others. So what are the reason for gossip is? It is out of envy, out of insecurity, and the desire to pull others down to establish our superiority. If we want to make ourselves superior, the method is what? We just have to prove how other person is nonsense. So problem with gossip is what? The mind of such person can never be fixed on the lotus feet of Krishna. And talking about others should be rejected in all respects. Immediately we should reject. And all these instructions have two different types of applications. So this is the main criteria is anukulyasya sankalpo, patikulyasya varjanam. And for householders, what is that? Who are sadhakas, married or unmarried, but this is basically for sadhakas. They should live in a Krishna conscious family. Whatever we do should have some connection to Krishna. Any activity if done in the mood of anukulyasya sankalpa, patikulyasya varjanam, then any unfavorable talk done also becomes part of bhakti. Also talk about others only whatever little is necessary in his Krishna conscious family, and should not talk about others in a way that is detrimental to anyone. So whatever is necessary, they may need to talk about others, but we should see it should not be detrimental and as minimum as possible. And we should not talk about others without reason. And when it comes to renunciate, who has given up home because of natural detachment, is at the stage of bhava, they can give up talking about others in all respects. Good, bad, nothing. No talking about others only, apart other than Krishna. And then there are favorable discussions about others. Okay, we should never talk about others. No, there are some instances where we can talk about others. When we should talk, discussing glories of acharyas and other Vaishnavas. This we can do. That means he is talking about others, but it is a glorification of them. Other is like why Mahajans and Gurus may sometimes, like somebody ask, why Mahajans and Guru sometimes talk about others. So we should understand, when a Guru is enlightening his disciple on some topic, then unless he occasionally talks about others, his instructions may not be clear. So he need to present some examples. For that, he will quote some situations or some persons. So when previous Mahajans have talked about others in this way, there is merit in such talk. It is not fault finding, but it to elevate the disciples whom he is giving his instructions. We can see 3-4 examples in this. First example is when Sukadeva Goswami is talking about materialistic. He says that Nidra hiyate naktam vyavayena cha bhavayah diya charti haya rajan kutumba bharnenava. So when he is criticizing, but since it is done to instruct others, is though Sukadeva Goswami is talking materialistic, it is not prajalpa, it is not considered gossip. It is for enlightening us. And then there is example where Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he wants to instruct. He talks about pseudo renunciate. So he's also talking about others. But he's following words. He's telling that the Lord replied, I cannot tolerate seeing the face of a person who has accepted the renounced route of life, but who still will talk intimately with a woman. There are many persons with little in their position who accept the renounced route of life like monkeys. They go there and they engaging in sense gratification and speaking intimately with women. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, my mind is not under my control. It does not like to see anyone in the renounced order who talks intimately with women. And if one discusses in this way, the improper behavior current in a religious sect or among the general public, then such talk is not adverse to devotional service. So if we are talking about it, it is for elevation. Even if someone talks about a particular person, there is no fault in it. And then we have another example where Maitreya is speaking. He is talking about Vena. He says, thus the king who became unintelligent due to his sinful life and deviation from the right path became actually bereft of all good fortune. He could not accept the request of the great sages, which the sages put before him with great respect, and therefore he is condemned. So now Maitreya is talking about Vena. Why he is talking about somebody else? It is not gossip, but it is to help us to elevate. So the particular, so practicing devotee normally discusses ancient history in the association of devotees, and occasionally may talk about non-devotees, but this is also considered favorable. Also, but those who talk about others while influenced by devotional impediments like envy, hatred, pride, or distinction are offenders at the feet of Bhakti Devi. And the last example, Prabhupada calling rascals and criticizing materialistic, it is also compassion. Compassion for them also, for us also. So Prabhupada saying rascals is out of his compassion. And then there are debates. So debate arises only from a desire to conquest. This is extremely abominable, participating in debates. And then fault finding. Fault finding arises only from imposing one's own bad habits on others. This should be given up in all respects. So all these things, Prajalpas, all the news channels which we see, they are filled with gossip, filled with debates, filled with fault finding. So this is completely nonsense things to see. And speaking falsehoods, all the qualities of Prajalpa are present in news channels. So speaking falsehood in another form is of useless talk and worldly talk. Worldly talk is completely rejected by renounced devotees. Householders may accept some worldly talk that is favorable to devotional service. So words that do not describe the transcendental personality of Godhead, but instead deal with the temporary matters are simply false and useless. Only those words that manifest the transcendental qualities of the Supreme Lord are actually truthful, auspicious, and pious. Hare Krishna. Thank you very much.
Hare Krishna, Babu. Thank you very much. That was very wonderful. So continue our discussion now. So that was a very good recap of what we have discussed till now, this theme of Prajalpa. So we did discuss 8 types of, we have not discussed about all 8. About 6 of them we have already discussed. Useless talks, arguments, gossip, debates, fault finding in others, and speaking falsehood. So we have to discuss about blaspheming devotees and worldly talk, which is left. So, but I will not recap them, what we have done, because Radha Pramod Prabhu has done a nice job. Worldly talk also we have discussed. Just one thing that is the remaining is the most fundamental of all these kinds of prajalpa, which is blaspheming other devotees. Before we continue that point, I will pause to see if there are any quick discussion points, comments, questions anyone would like to share before we move on to discuss the 8th type of obstacle, which is blaspheming devotees. Anything anyone would like to share as add? Okay, Ansh Prabhu.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, Ranat Pranam.
Dandavat.
Prabhuji, related to this discussion we had, where the great personalities, can criticize like Shukdev Goswami, Nidhar Nete Hakta. But in our case, how should we approach these verses? And sometimes we see other devotees, and we also sometimes use these verses, but maybe in our heart compassion is not there. But actually, we feel kind of we don't speak it with a pure intention. So should we use such verses, or should we not? And in our in lectures and all this.
Well, in lecture we can quote Shukadev Goswami and say, but the mood should never be to put them down and show as if we are great. So in that mood it should not be presented, but we can definitely quote Srila Shukadev Goswami and say that this is what he talks about people with materialistic mentality. So that is a very generic presentation. As long as you are not yourself in any category while criticizing others, you are not putting yourself in a different category. As long as it is a criticism of those with materialistic mentality, where you are not taking the position of the criticizer, it is fine, because that's there in Bhagavatam, and we need to speak about it. But it should not be spoken in a mood of critical mentality and a sense of feeling good while putting them down. That should not be the mood. Is that okay?
Yes, Prabhuji. Thank you.
Hare Krishna. Okay, there is something in the chat box. Can we please specify the ways or situations where we can unintentionally become participants in blasphemy of devotees? Okay, we are going to discuss blasphemy of devotees. We have not yet discussed that section. So, and also when it comes to non-devotees, yeah, we will discuss that, because blasphemy is the last part and we have not touched it yet. Okay, Arpita.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Prabhuji, uh, Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Yes, Mataji, go ahead.
Prabhuji, actually, it was discussed that by arguments, what happens, natural discretion of the jiva changes.
Hmm.
And natural discretion of the jiva says anukulasya sankalpa and pratikulasya varjanam. And by engaging in arguments, it changes. But Prabhuji, I'm not able to understand that natural value system of the jivas, like anukulasya sankalpa pratikulasya varjanam, it will be there in the spiritual world. In material world, it is not like that now. Then in material world, already jivas don't have this value system.
Well, the natural value system of the soul is covered with various coverings, and arguing will add one more covering to it. That's what it is.
Oh, that is it will make it difficult, more difficult.
Yeah.
And
yeah, already there are so many kama, krodha, lobha, moha, mada, matsarya, and so many other coverings which are covering this natural discretion of the soul to always perform those activities which are pleasing to Krishna and refrain from performing those activities which are displeasing to Krishna. This arguing will add further layers to it and make the jiva all the more difficult to express that natural discretion. That's what it means.
And Prabhuji, I wanted, can you please give an example of arguing because of aversion or attachment to sense gratification? What does that mean actually?
Well, if we are averse to doing something and someone forces us to do, because it is the right thing to do or whatever, we may end up in arguing also. That we may make up some kind of arguments which may seemingly show that this is the right thing to do. So so aversion, or this is the wrong thing to do and I should not be doing. So sometimes we're averse to doing the right things, and when someone forces us to do that which we don't like, even though it may be the right thing, we may end up arguing against it. Okay, well, actually, this is not the right thing to do, like that. So, and same thing due to sense gratification is the exact opposite. When someone asks us to refrain from something which is not favorable, but because we are attached to, because it gratifies our senses, we may give various arguments to say, no, this is the thing to do. Actually, the Shastras recommend, don't you see, like that. So that way arguments can arise out of aversion to do the right thing and eagerness to do the wrong thing because it gratifies our senses.
Okay, Prabhuji. And Prabhuji, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, after giving the example of Sukhdev Goswami and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he tells that even we can discuss about the improper behavior which is current in a religious sect or amongst the general public,
Correct.
like that he says. And he also says
Mm.
that like how Maitreya Muni talks about Vena Maharaj, so we can also talk about a particular person.
Yeah.
So if any organization, some personalities are there, and if we have to warn the audience against them, against their religious sect, then we can do it now, Prabhuji. No problem with that.
Well, it has to be done in a very sensitive way, and
Mm-hmm.
taking into account that how we are not doing it while being influenced by envy, hatred, pride, or
Mm-hmm.
distinction. Well,
Yes.
distinction is a very important thing. Like we feel that I have to somehow prove that what I am following is the best. So
Mm-hmm.
that sense of distinction, that should not, uh, and if there is no need, we need not artificially bring that.
Mm-hmm.
Prabhupada had a way of doing it.
Mm-hmm.
So Prabhupada's, when he would never attack a personality, he would say, "Oh, what does he say?"
Mm-hmm.
Prabhupada had various ways of doing it. Prabhupada used to say, "Oh, Prabhupada, what do you think of this personality?" Sometimes Prabhupada would say, "Oh, I don't think of him," uh, which means, why should I think about him? Or other ways, he would say, "What does he say?" Uh, Rather than he is nonsense, Prabhupada would say, "What does he say?" So then, when you present something, then you say, "Oh, but Bhagavatam says this way." So that way,
Mm-hmm.
uh, one can do it if there is a need. One need not artificially bring that point
Mm-hmm.
to, but if someone is, if there is a genuine desire to help someone out of a wrong sect or a wrong
Mm-hmm.
ideology, then one can do it definitely.
Okay, Prabhuji. And Prabhuji, this about fault finding. So
Mhm.
fault finding sometimes because of some devotees' behaviors and other things, we might get hurt. So we definitely will see that fault in them,
Mhm.
and we might not intentionally do, but when someone's behavior or speech hurts us, then when we are hurt, we are able to see that fault, and our mind will think that yes, this is present in that devotee. But
Mhm.
so we are wrong by thinking like that, or we are wrong when we share with that with others. Where are we wrong in this?
To share with others is certainly wrong,
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
but if you are seeing that fault,
Hmm.
you are seeing it. You cannot not see it. If you are seeing it, you are seeing.
Hmm.
The
Hmm.
only thing is, Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur says uh, that if you see that fault in others, you can think that I am honeycombed with so much faults. That's why I'm seeing those faults as that way.
Hmm. Hmm.
Because if we don't have that fault, then we may not be able to, like in Yamuna Mataji's biography, um, Her Grace Dinatarani Mataji shares that sometimes someone would act in a very hurting way, in a very envious, and Yamuna
Hmm.
Mataji would ask Dinatarani Mataji, why is this dude behaving with me like this? Uh, what wrong did I do? And
Hmm.
Dinatani Mataji would say, "Oh, don't you clearly see that the person is envious of you?" And
Hmm.
she would uh, she would say, "Envious of me? What do I have to feel for someone to feel envious of?" I mean, the point is, Dinatani Mataji makes there that because Yamuna Mataji had absolutely no envy, she had no capacity to trace envy in one's heart. So that is the point, when we don't have it, they cannot see it in others, when we are, many times we find the fault in others because it is born out of our own deep insecurity, because we are so much prone to committing the same mistake. When we are when we are struggling with lust, then we can very easily find out other people who are also similarly struggling, because we are insecure with anartha. And similarly, in it's about other arthas also. It's our own insecurity which makes us super sensitive of finding that anartha in others, because ourselves are struggling with it. It's our own weakness. But when we are fairly free of that particular anartha, then then we don't see it in others actually.
Means, Rajay, I'm not talking about those anarthas, but some behaviors of devotees. Sometimes, devotees will promise something and then they will not fulfill that, like that. And many times they will just not be very. Like sometimes we will ask them something and they will be very casual, not bothered to reply, also not bothered, and they will not feel any like
Yeah,
these small things, Prabhuji, not big
yeah,
anarthas I'm talking about.
yeah. Even the small thing, I'll tell you. For example, I have two relatives. I will talk about my personal experience. One is my father, who is a super conservative person when it comes to certain things. Like, for example, if you have to go to the railway station to catch a train, he will
Hmm.
go, he will leave the house 2 hours before, 3 hours before, even though the railway station is half an hour from home. So he will say, let's say the first vehicle breaks down and we are waiting for the next vehicle, and the next vehicle also breaks down, and then we should have sufficient time, or once we reach the station and we realize that we have forgotten something at home, we should have sufficient time to go back home, get it, and come back. So like that, I mean, every time you end up reaching the stage 2.5 to 3 hours before. So this is one extreme. And on the other extreme is another uncle of mine who would literally always catch the train after it has started only. If he will think that even if I reach 1 minute before the train starts, it's a waste of time. I could have utilized my time much more usefully, like that. So when let's say when these two personalities are planning to travel together, right? Each will keep on finding fault with each other, right?
Hmm.
Because they are trained in a particular value system. Like we are trained in a value system where if someone says something, they have to absolutely honor it.
Hmm.
So therefore, such things we are very, very sensitive about when that is not honored.
Hmm.
Whereas the other person may have a casual attitude, and he or may not really uh, take things that seriously, and they may feel very pricked when people start taking small things seriously. So they may see it
Hmm.
as, why are you taking such a small thing so seriously? And you may say, why are you taking such a big thing so casually? So it is
Hmm.
two ways of looking at the same thing. It's just that what we are, the kind of culture, the way we are cultured, and if someone is not cultured in the same way, we immediately find a fault. But we have to see that it's just, um, ultimately it's okay. I mean, these are not things
Hmm.
which
Hmm.
are worth, brooding over to stunt our own doing. This is not worthy.
But
That's what.
Prabhuji, in those cases, making a relationship with the other person becomes difficult, na?
You don't
Because
have
when
to.
you don't have to, na? Okay.
You don't.
So,
I mean,
okay.
you don't have to have the best of relationships with everyone.
Yes, yes,
You,
yes,
you.
yes.
I mean, if you don't see that like-mindedness, then you can
Hmm.
have a very neutral relationship, and you
Okay.
can respect them from a distance. You don't have to have a working relationship with everyone like that.
Okay, Prabhuji. And about when I means when I get when I got hurt and when I saw that thing, so I should just not focus so much on it, and I should just think that they have different value system and it's okay, no
Yeah,
problem, no,
yeah,
never
yeah,
mind like that. Okay, thank
yeah.
you, Prabhuji. Thank you so much.
Hare Krishna. Tiffany Mathis.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji, please accept my humble obeisances. All
Please
glories to
accept.
Prabhupada. Thank you so much for your answers to Arpita Mataji. That was very helpful. But one of the questions she asked actually made me think of something where she asked about, well, it started actually at the beginning of her question, which was, you know, if you see something in a devotee that's difficult to deal with, basically, and you said, of course, you know, we don't talk about it to other devotees, and I completely understand that. But sometimes we experience things with other devotees that's really hurtful, or you know, or actually kind of creates an obstacle in our service. And I'm wondering if it's okay to go to senior devotees just to talk about it, to not to blaspheme them or anything like that, but to get some guidance and talk to other devotees to get it off your chest. Because sometimes, you know, things are very hurtful and holding them in seems to hurt even more.
Absolutely, Mataji. That is perfectly fine. We can always go to a senior devotee who can actually address the issue. Because if we are getting affected, so there's a good chance that others may also get affected. So as long as our intention is right and we are approaching the people who can actually they have capacity to deal with it, we can definitely speak about it. Certainly not blasphemy.
Okay. Thank you so much for clearing that up, Prabhuji. Hare
Hare
Krishna.
Krishna. Thank you. Gail Mathu.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Yeah,
Hare
I also want to talk about this finding when you're able to detect some fault in others, you know, that it reflects on your having the same fault. I've never been thoroughly convinced of this. Let me just say, as an example, again, let's say that's time, punctuality, right? Let's say if I am a very punctual person, I'm always dealing with somebody who is always late, you know, isn't considerate of other people's time, you know. Now, how does that reflect on me? I'm a punctual person. That person is not at all punctual. So how do I have that person's fault?
It means I am very attached to being punctual. That's why I am very clearly seeing people who are not. So I see it as my attachment to punctuality, which is making me. So it need not be that if I am late, I will see other people coming late. It's not like that. It's just that I make a big deal about time. You know, time is something which is very, I am very attached to it.
Okay,
So,
so actually what is happening is that you're actually just seeing a reflection of your own values then.
yeah.
If
In
you
one
have a
sense,
problem with somebody, right?
Yeah.
Doesn't mean that you have that exact problem. Is that the fact that you have a problem with whatever the issue is a reflection of what is important to you.
Yeah. It's just a reflection of my own attachments. That's all.
Yeah, yeah. Attachments, values, whatever. But it doesn't mean that you have that identical issue, isn't it?
Not necessarily. In some cases,
Not
it may
necessarily.
be.
Yes, 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 yes. In some cases, maybe, but okay, that makes so much more sense to me. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay, so if there are no further discussion points or questions, we will move ahead to the last aspect of Prajalpa, which is blasphemy, which is the most virulent form of Prajalpa, which can very quickly deplete our devotional credits in comparison to all the other kinds of Prajalpa. So we'll start discussing that. So, blaspheming sadhus. Actually, for those of you who would like to, in Bhaktiyaloka, this topic is not discussed in that great detail, but I have discussed this in either Harinam Chintamani or in Madhurya Kadambini. In both of these sections, in both of these books, I have discussed this topic of blaspheming the sadhus in great detail. I have compiled from various books and I have put it. So interested devotees can, you can personally contact me. I can send you the YouTube links and you can hear them. So, but for now, I will discuss whatever is mentioned here in Bhaktiyaloka. But if you want a more detailed discussion on this topic, I can send you the necessary links. So you can contact me personally. So, blaspheming sadhus is the source of great inauspiciousness. If one wants to attain devotion to Lord Hari, then he should make a vow like this. In this life, I will never blaspheme sadhus. Well, there is nothing wrong in taking a vow, right? A sincere vow. We may sometimes, we may not be able to fulfill that vow. Initially, it may happen that after every 3-4 days, that vow might get broken, right? But the point is, for 3 or 4 days, we did follow the vow, right? And then after some time, it may happen once a week, we may break that vow. But still for a week, we have followed it. And then slowly, we may be able to, the vow may get broken once a month. The good news is for 1 month, we could perfectly follow it. So in this way, there is nothing wrong in making a vow, even though occasionally we may not be able to follow that vow. So that should not deter one from taking vows. At least one, many times people get demotivated. This is one thing, especially when they want to follow a diet, let's say they are working on their weight, they want to reduce their weight. So they may want to abstain from, sweets and fried items and rice, whatever. So they follow it for 6 days very carefully. And the 7th day, they break it. And they say, oh no, all that hard work has gone down the drain. One should not feel, why? All the hard work, how has it gone down the drain? 6 days you could follow. And that the effect of following it for 6 days is there. Okay, 7th day you broke. No problem. From 8th day onwards, continue. Right? What is the loss? At least 6/7 of the gain will be there, right? 6 out of 7 days, if you could follow, then 6/7 of that benefit we will get. So many times people lose the determination to follow a vow if they occasionally fail, or even if one may not so occasionally fail also, that does not mean one has to give up the vow completely as long as it is good. Because instead of, if you give it up, then 7 out of 7 days we will be succumbing. Instead, if once in 7 days you succumb, it is still victory. So that should be our approach to vows rather than, black and white. A black and white approach to vows is very, very difficult actually. That is of no benefit. So therefore, because this is a very difficult vow that Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur is mentioning. Is it that difficult vows should not be taken? No, difficult vows, let us take difficult vows, let us fail in difficult vows, and gradually we will start failing less and less frequently, and that should be our success. Failing in executing a vow is not failure, but giving up that endeavor itself, giving up our endeavor to take an honorable vow is actually a failure. Not eat non-prasadam. One should take that vow. But once in a while, in a very difficult situation, we succumb. Or sometimes due to a difficult temptation, we may succumb. That does not mean we should stop taking such vows. We should take. Let us fail, no problem. But let us pick ourselves up and pat our shoulders for nicely executing it for all these days, and then try doing it again. So instead of succumbing to it 7 days a week because of not taking a vow, it is better to fail once a week having taken a vow. So definitely, even though Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur is telling a vow which is very difficult, especially living in an institution where wherever a force hierarchy is there, there will always be ample reasons for criticism and blasphemy. So it is it's not very it's very difficult to avoid it, but should not deter us from taking vows. Yes, I will not. But after a week, oh, I did. But that's okay. At least at least for 1 week, I could avoid it. So that should be our attitude. Otherwise, in this day and age, if we are averse to taking vows because we cannot follow the vows, then it becomes very difficult. Then it is very, very difficult actually. So he says, he's a sadhu. He gives a very simple definition. Devotees are sadhus. By blaspheming them, all one's virtues are destroyed. By blaspheming the supremely pure Lord Mahadev, Prajapati Daksha, the best of ascetics, met with severe inauspicious. He lost his head and eventually got the head of a goat, which is very inauspicious for such a great leader of the whole world. Bhagavatam 10th canto says, Ayuhu Shriyam Yasho Dharmam Lokan Ashisha Evacha Hanti Shreyamsi Sarvani Pumso Mahad Atikrama. My dear king, when a man persecutes great souls, all his benedictions of longevity, beauty, fame, religion, blessings, and promotion to higher planets will be destroyed. So, therefore, one should be very careful. It is always a good vow to take, the best vow to take. I will not blaspheme a Vaishnava. Better to fail occasionally while taking vow than to not take such a vow. It's better that we fail occasionally. Any vow, any good vow for that matter. It is always good to fail occasionally in executing that vow than to not take that vow. We should not hesitate to take such vows. The conclusion of this essay is this: whatever prajalpa is not favorable for devotional service should be carefully given up by Vaishnavas who are cultivating bhakti. So that's all. Just these two slides, 2 or 3 slides he has given. For blaspheming sadhus, he says it should be given up. But as I mentioned, there are much more details to it. How does one blaspheme? Why? Why does one blaspheme? What is the root cause of that blasphemy? How do you address the root cause? If you have already blasphemed, then what do you do? How do you rectify the mistake? And what are the various kinds of blasphemy? And what instigates that blaspheming nature and all those things? There's a lot of details to it, which are very, very critical. So, as I mentioned, if you want, I can share the links with you and you can go over. Okay. So he says the conclusion in this essay is this. This is the essential conclusion of this whole essay. Whatever prajalpa is not favorable for devotional service should be carefully given up by Vaishnavas who are cultivating bhakti. This is the most important thing. Amongst these instructions, the instruction to tolerate the urge to speak mentioned in the first verse, Vachovegam, is only a conditional urge. So the point is, as we discussed, there are two kinds of things. There is one was Vachovegam, and then here there is a mention of Prajalpa. So in this, the word Vachovegam, urge to speak, is a conditional urge. Okay. Sometimes it's not that 24 hours a day we have an urge to speak something. We don't, right? Sometimes we like, something is really troubling you and you really want to speak with someone to get it off chest, as Tiffany Mataji was telling. You really want to get it off your chest. So for that, you may want to speak. So the urge to speak is conditional urge. And once you speak, that urge is gone. Whereas this avoiding prajalpa, this is more of a constitutional change that we need to make. So whenever the opportunity to speak is there, if we end up speaking favorable prajalpa, then gradually it diminishes our immunity to avoid vachovegam, to resist vachovegam. Etan veganyo vishaheta dira. To tolerate the urge to speak will become severely compromised when if whenever the opportunity to speak is there, we end up utilizing it in speaking unfavorable prajalpa. Then when the urge to speak is there, we will have very little immunity to tolerate that urge. So in this way, Vachovegam mentioned in the first verse is a conditional urge, and avoiding prajalpa, which is mentioned in the second verse, is more of a constitutional change that you need to make. That you have an opportunity to speak, you can speak now, right? So make the choice to speak the right thing. So then when you reach a situation where you should stop speaking, you should resist your urge to speak. We will be able to resist our urge to speak if we have utilized our opportunity to speak in the right way. If we have misused the opportunity to speak by not speaking the right way, then whenever the urge to speak comes, we will not have the ability or tolerance to resist. That is the point that he is mentioning here. Amongst these instructions, the instruction to tolerate the urge to speak mentioned in the first verse, Vacho Vegam, is only a conditional urge. By giving up Prajalpa, the urge to speak is permanently regulated. So, the urge to speak is regulated. So, Vacho Vegam means when you have an urge to speak, as long as you are not speaking Prajalpa, you don't have to give up that urge also. You can speak. Because Vasudeva Kata Prashna Lokan Strin Prapunatihi Vaktaram Prichakam Shirotrim Tatpada Salilam Yata, as it is mentioned in the canto, first chapter. The three kinds of people get purified by speaking Krishna Katha. Vakta, the speaker, Prichakam, who is asking relevant questions, and Shirotrim, one who is listening to the conversation. All three are purified. So, if one has the urge to speak, if he can regulate it by always speaking Krishna Katha and things relevant to Krishna consciousness, then there is no need to curb that urge, because it's a very favorable way of engaging the urge to speak. That's what he says. By giving up Prajalpa, the urge to speak is permanently regulated. In order to pass one's life without sin, one should not speak anything more than whatever little is necessary. So if this urge to speak, if one develops this quality of not speaking even a word more than whatever is necessary, then one can live a life free of sin. This is a very powerful statement that Srila, because everything starts with the words only. One need discuss only whatever is auspicious for oneself and others. Because discussing and talking about something actually, just hold on. Just hold on. Yeah. So, yeah, I totally forgot what I was talking. Anyway, let's continue. If one wants to discuss topics of others, it will simply be useless speech. Therefore, in Srimad Bhagavatam 11:28, Lord Krishna instructed Uddhava as follows. This is a very important verse. Para swabhava karma yap prashamsati nindati sa ashu brashyate swartha asatyabhiniveshataha. This is a very important principle. This is the essence of this whole essay. Yaha, that person, prashamsati, who praises, nindati, or criticizes. He who indulges in praising or criticizing, para swabhava karmani, para of others, swabhava their nature, karmani their activities. If one engages in praising or criticizing qualities and behavior of others, saha, that person, ashu, very quickly, brashyate swartat, he will deviate from his self-interest. Why? Asati abhiniveshataha, because of his entanglement in illusory dualities. Right? So he's talking about the question that might naturally come is, am I not supposed to praise? Criticize, I understand, but what's wrong in praising? Here he is talking about praising the material qualities which may not necessarily have a connection with Krishna, or which may not have utility in Krishna consciousness, and also praising from a utilitarian point of view rather than praising as an act of genuinely praising someone's Krishna conscious qualities. So this is what he is talking about. So whoever indulges in praising para swabhava karmani, if one engages in praising or criticizing someone's behavior, material behavior or activities. Let's say praising can mean something which, you know, the great national leaders, the sacrifice they have done for the country. Well, it's not that we should not be grateful, but that does not mean you spend a lot of time discussing about their glorious sacrifice. Which is not wrong. What they have done is great, but that does not mean that it is more worthy to discuss than Krishna Katha. So that is the point. If we want to really glorify them for their sacrifice, we can offer prayers for them. You know, we can pray, Krishna, please, you know, he has done some act of sacrifice. Please let me chant one round for them. Isn't that better than to just come together and collect devotees and keep glorifying, let's say, Prime Minister of India or whomever? Rather, what would be a better way of doing? You are taking 5-6 people's time, which they could have potentially utilized in Krishna's in doing Krishna Katha. You are taking 6-7 people's time and engaging them in some Katha which is not going to spiritually elevate them. Rather, won't it be better that if you chant one round for that person? It is good for you. It is good for that person whom you are admiring. And at the same time, it saves another 6-7 people's time for which they could utilize in Krishna's service. So paraswabhava karmani. That's why in today's day and age, so much of time and material is energy is utilized in circulating so many things about nationalism and you know, this political party, that party, you know, and the wonderful things and what is happening to, you know, this sect, this Hindu sect, whatever. And it is very good. You know, we should not allow anyone to exploit anyone. But the point is, if we are genuinely compassionate, why not chant some rounds for that? Would be that would be a better way of doing, rather than taking so many people's valuable time, which they might otherwise utilize in Krishna's service, and take it to discuss some topic which you may, according to you, may be very important, but nonetheless it's not Krishna conscious. I mean, this is a very this is little sensitive, but in reality, this is truth, whatever it be, but it is taking people's valuable time out of their Krishna consciousness. And at the most, it may increase some communal hatred towards a particular class of people, which will take our time again away from Krishna consciousness. So therefore, paraswabhava karmani ya prashamsati nindati. To criticize or to praise material qualities of others is actually wasting our time. Asati abhiniveshitaha. Asati abhiniveshitaha means because we are focused, we are absorbed in the illusory things, material things, temporary material things, temporary material qualities, temporary material activities. The only thing that is fit to be glorified is someone's execution of Krishna consciousness. That can be glorified. But if that is not the case, then we can appreciate, you know, some politician is doing something which is helping your practice of Krishna consciousness very nicely. The best thing that we can do to that politician is offer some prayer for him and chant a few rounds for his spiritual progress. That is the best way of doing it. Rather than spending time glorifying him, thinking about him, and involving so many other people, and using our sense of, we may have some charisma, we may have some attractive capacity, we may have some power position, using all that to take the valuable time and energy and consciousness of so many other devotees and engaging all of that in non-Krishna conscious talk is actually a big disservice. So we should be very careful in doing these things. That's why he says, Paraswabhava karmani yaha prashamsati nindati sa ashu brashyate swartat asati abhiniveshitaha. So, even prashamsa or glorification of these material qualities, if at all you want to glorify the devotees, glorify the devotional qualities, and if at all we want to criticize, let us criticize our own inclinations to engage in so many non-Krishna conscious activities. Otherwise, this is not worthy endeavor. That's what, this is the essence. So, prashamsa, ninda, this is all both a kind of prajalpa, two types of prajalpa. And what it does is, sa ashu brashyate swartad. It actually deviates us from our goal of life, from the useful thing of life, in executing the useful things of life. Asati abhiniveshita, because of absorbing our consciousness in actually in the temporary things of this world. Okay, so that brings us to the end of Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur's essay on Prajalpa in as given Bhakti Aloka. So next we will discuss also from Srila Prabhupada's commentary to this particular aspect in his Nectar of Instruction. We will discuss that. But before that, if there are any quick comments, discussion points before we move to Srila Prabhupada's discussion, I will pause for a few seconds to see if there is anything anyone would like to share, add, ask. Anything anyone would like to share? Okay, if there is nothing, then we will move on. Srila Prabhupada on Delpa. So Srila Prabhupada writes in his Nectar of Instruction, another impediment is prajalpa, unnecessary talking. When we mix with a few friends, we immediately begin unnecessary talking, sounding just like croaking toads. If we must talk, we should talk about the Krishna consciousness movement. Those outside of Krishna consciousness movement are interested in reading heaps of newspapers, magazines, and novels, solving crossword puzzles, and doing many other nonsensical things. In this fashion, people simply waste their valuable time and energy. So, it's not, Prajalpa is not just in speaking, Prajalpa is in reading also. So, what we read is also Prajalpa. If we are reading not so Krishna conscious things, that is also Prajalpa only. So, okay. In the Western countries, old men retired from active life play cards, fish, watch television, and debate about useless socio-political schemes. All these and other frivolous activities are included in the Prajalpa category. Intelligent persons interested in Krishna consciousness should never take part in such activities. That's all. Prabhupada writes a very short purport to this. Any quick comments? discussion points? Okay, if there is none, then we'll continue. Next, we will discuss commentary on this aspect of Prajalpa Srila Bhakti Rakshak Siddhar Swami Maharaj, Srila Prabhupada's dear God brother. Okay, he writes, to abuse the reign of our self-control and allow ourselves to enter into discussions of anything and everything, that is Prajalpa. Prajalpa generally becomes para dosha anusandhan, finding fault with others. Generally, it ends up that way only. That is generally the subject matter of idle talks. Because idle, non-Krishna conscious, but not so inimical talks generally degrade into more severely detrimental forms of Prajalpa. So there is no, we have to see even harmless forms of Prajalpa, we should see them as the foundation stone for more severe forms of Prajalpa. So there is no harmless Prajalpa actually, because it is just a foundation. Because engaging in harmless type of Prajalpa, it just shows our disinclination to glorify Krishna, our lack of taste to glorify Krishna. And therefore, and when we keep watering it by actually engaging in harmless forms of Prajalpa, gradually it will degrade into more harmful forms of Prajalpa. So therefore, we have to be very careful. So then, Maharaj says, when the guardian analyzes this fault with his affectionate disciple, guardian here refers to the Guru, analyzes this fault with his affectionate disciple to point out and correct him with a sympathetic and graceful eye. He himself will not become contaminated if he is pure enough. I mean, I just want you to read this statement. How the statement is, this one sentence, how many qualifiers it has? Okay, how many qualifiers? I will just number it for you. When the guardian, this is the first qualifier, he should be a guardian, a guru, analyzes this fault with his affectionate, second qualifier, disciple, third qualifier, to point out and correct him. This is the fourth qualifier. With sympathetic, fifth qualifier, graceful, sixth qualifier. He himself will not become contaminated if he is pure enough. This is the seventh qualifier. There is only one full stop here, one single sentence. So he says, who can correct? And in one sentence, he seven qualifiers. When the guardian analyzes this fault with his affectionate disciple and point out and correct him with a sympathetic and graceful eye, he himself will not be contaminated if he is pure enough. You see, seven things. Can you believe? If you want to correct someone, otherwise it becomes a problem. You must be guru, you must have affection, and you may have affection, but he should be a disciple also, and you should be correcting him and not just pointlessly pointing out faults. You must have sympathy, you must do it with grace, and doing all that you should be pure enough. because you are pointing out someone's fault, you better be pure enough. I mean, if we can memorize this one sentence with all the qualifiers, this will save us actually. Very important point that he says. See the choice of words. When the guardian analyzes this fault with his affectionate disciple to point out and correct him with a sympathetic and graceful eye, he himself will not become contaminated if he is pure enough. Which means if we are not pure enough, with whatever intention we are pointing out mistakes, then it will affect our spiritual life. We have to see. So, therefore, he says, when a doctor is treating an infected patient, the infection may naturally come to him. But if the doctor is well guarded, it will not infect him, as he is conscious of the poisonous nature of the disease and is very careful when he tries to remove it from the body of the patient. Right? So, the point is this. When a doctor is treating an infected patient, the infection may naturally come to him. This danger is always there. So if we are not well guarded, and what does it mean to be well guarded? All these 7 things. Okay. So we have to be well guarded. Otherwise, the infection will come to us. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu instructed Raghunath Das Goswami. Gramya kata na shunibe, gramya varta na kahibe. Bhalana kaibe, ara bhalana peribe. Do not talk like people in general or hear what they say. You should not eat very palatable, nor should you dress very nice. Amani manada haya Krishna nama sadalabe. Braje Radha Krishna seva manasa karibe. Do not expect honor, but offer all respects to others. Always chant the holy name of Lord Krishna, and within your mind render service to Radha and Krishna and Vrindavan. He says, we must not attend to worldly talk. Neither should we engage in that bhalana kaive or bhalana perive. This is very important actually. Don't seek after the satisfaction of our tongue and belly, and don't try to wear any good dress to be admired by the people. Amani manadahaya Krishna nama sadalate. Give honor to all, but don't seek honor from anyone. In this way, we will take the holy name of Krishna continuously. Right? So, this was the instruction of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to Srila Raghunath Das Goswami, our Prayojanacharya. So, where he says that Gramya Vardhana Kahidu, like that. Okay. We are requested to talk about the Supreme Lord, and by that process, all undesirability within us may vanish. So let's talk about the Supreme Lord. By that, all undesirability will be vanished. Speak always and only about Krishna. Speaking means reproducing. When we speak something, we cannot but be fully attentive. This is a very important point that he's talking about. While hearing, we can be inattentive. While speaking, you cannot afford to be inattentive. While reading or hearing, we can inattentively read and hear. While speaking and explaining something to someone, we cannot afford to be inattentive at all. It is not possible. Unless you understand the subject matter, it is not possible to actually speak about it. If you don't understand the subject matter, one cannot confidently speak about it. So one has to be very attentive. When we speak something, we cannot but be fully attentive. We cannot speak nonsense. When we speak, we must be fully attentive. It is difficult to have conversation within. So preaching or speaking forcibly makes us concentrate on a particular call. So while speaking is the best way to be fully attentive. It's not passive, it's very active. And anything which is active calls for full attention. We cannot actively do something without full attention or without a reasonable amount of attention. And so therefore, the opportunity to speak is opportunity to be fully focused and attentive. And that full focus and attention should be for speaking about Krishna. Otherwise, we are misusing. And not only that, it cannot be nonsense to the public. It cannot be nonsense to the public. That is why we speak, one very senior devotee in our society, he says that if you don't prepare well for a class and then whatever you speak is actually violence to the audience, because you are taking their collective time, their collective energy, their collective consciousness. You are taking them for granted. So if our own consciousness is not good, our own, we are not well prepared. We are not ready to utilize our time and energy in preparing for the subject matter. We are going to just speak something. We are just going to give a piece of our mind to the public. Then it is violence. And if our consciousness is not proper to convey the subject matter, to convey a very grave subject matter to people in general, then we are taking their time, their energy, their consciousness for granted. We cannot allow our not so Krishna consciousness to percolate into their hearts. It is violence actually. So therefore, if you are having the ability to command the attention of so many people, we should ensure that they get something which will make them more Krishna conscious. Otherwise, it is great disservice. If otherwise it's better to keep it inside ourselves than to speak it. If we have lot of interest in so many worldly things, worldly matters, keep it inside ourselves. Why speak? Because these people look up to you, and if we end up seeing all these things, then we are distracting them also from the path of Krishna consciousness. And what a big disservice actually. So we cannot speak nonsense actually. It cannot be nonsense to the public. He says, I must be alert in what I am speaking. In that way, it has been selected as the highest form of means to the highest end in this Kali Yuga especially. Yajnair Sankirtana Praya Ejanti Sumedha. Especially in Kali Yuga. Asti Eko Mahan Gunaha. Kirtanadeva Krishnasya Mukta Sangha Param Bhajet. So it is very important. He says, so therefore, speaking commands our total attention. Actually, you cannot be not thoughtful while speaking. You have to think, process what you are speaking, and extract the essence and speak to whatever capability we may have. But we unconsciously, especially when we have an attentive audience, then we unconsciously do it. Of course, to our own ability. Some of us may be able, some of us may not be so able. We may not have the ability to extract, but we constantly do it to the best of our capacity, actively and constantly extracting the essence and presenting it with our discrimination. So that is the capacity of talking, So we have to utilize it in the right way for the benefit of ourselves and for the benefit of those who are hearing it. He says, speaking must be done in a proper way. So he quotes this famous verse from the first canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. Narada Muni's instructs to Vyasadeva. Nayadvachas padam harer yasho jagat pavitram pragranita karhichit tadvayasam tirtam ushanti manasa nayatra hamsa niramantu shikshayah. So he says, yet chitrapadam vachaha, works which may have attractive verses with lot of beautiful figures of speech, similes, metaphors, iterations, and whatnot. But na karhichit pragranita, but that which does not sing at all. Harer yashaha, the glories of the Supreme Lord. Jagat pavitram, which is capable of purifying this whole world. Tad ushanti, such attractively composed non-Krishna conscious verses are considered manasa by the swan-like devotees, Vayasam Tirtham, to be the place for crows. It considered to be a place of pilgrimage for the crows. Yatra, in which Ushikshayaha Hamsa, swans living in pleasant lakes, na niramanti, they take no enjoyment at all. Nowadays, even in devotees forums, and now there are so many forums, so many WhatsApp groups, Facebook, Instagram, so many other such things. Within these devotee forums also, what is being shared is something which may be very poetically full or maybe a brilliant thought, but at the most, it is a product of a fertile material brain. That's all. But it is not something which is anything Krishna conscious actually. So therefore, why should we take so many people's time, energy, and consciousness for granted? It is a big disservice actually. So he says, this style, the language, etc., is very beautiful. But if you dive deep, you will find no mention of the glories of the Lord. It is lifeless. Apranaiva dehasya mandanam lokaranjanam. It is like decorating a dead body very beautifully. It is of no use. Outward dress may be very fine and attractive. The decoration may be very nice, but if there is something wrong with the inner substance, then what is the necessity of that? Rather, words work as poison to us. But on the other hand, the outer grandeur may not be so charming. But the very subject, the substance within, if it is nectar-like, then it is a very desirable thing. We must try to accept that. Like, in one sense, even His Holiness Srila Bhakti Rakshak Swami Maharaj himself was not a very charismatic personality. If you read in Srila Prabhupada's Leelamrit, Prabhupada used to push him to go out and preach. Even though Prabhupada was a grihastha at that time, and Bhakti Rakshak Swami Maharaj was a senior sannyasi, but he was not very charismatic in that sense. But he was a very, very, very thoughtful person, acknowledged by Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur himself as a very advanced devotee. So Srila Prabhupada used to push him to go out and preach. So the outer grandeur may not be so charming, but the very subject, the substance within is nectar-like, then it is a very desirable thing. We must try to accept that. Ignore the ornamental, but accept the substance within. That should be the aim of our life. This is a Saragrahi Vaishnava, one who is an essence seeker. Seek the essence, but many times we get trapped in the outer glitter. We get trapped in the outer glitter. That's the problem. But all that glitters is not gold. We have to look for the essence and not the outer glitter. Okay. He quotes this verse. Tad vag visargo janataga viplavo yasmin pratishlokam abaddavatyapi namanyanantasya yashomkitaniyat grinvanti gayanti grinanti sadava. So he says, tad vag visargo, that usage of words, yasmin, in which shlokam, every single shloka, abaddavatyapi, is so improperly constructed. There is no proper grammar, there is no proper poetic usage, there is no figures of embellishing figures of speech. But anantasya namani, but in which there is plenty of names of the Supreme Lord, yet yasho ankitani, and which is endowed with lot of glory of the Supreme Lord. Then the Saragrahi Vaishnava, he negs this unattractive exterior and goes for the sar, the essence. How does he respond? Shrinvan gayanti grinanti sadava. They hear, they sing, and they again receive such words. And what is the nature of those words? Janata aghaviplavo. It has the capacity to destroy all the sins of people. So therefore, we have to sort of cultivate this mood of not getting trapped by the glitter and learning to go for the essence. So otherwise, there are so many glittering things all around. If we have not learned to seek the essence, then we are the losers. Then we will get trapped in the glitter. Like that. So Maharaj continues. Let me see how much more we have. Okay, just 3 more slides. So he says, the subject matter of our speech should be the absolute. It may not be ornamented. It may not be grammatically correct. It may have some defect. It does not matter. Grammatical mistakes and other such ornamental mistakes are overlooked by the Lord. He reads the heart. The language of the heart is all in all. So this is very important. The theme must be about the absolute, and we should always try to pronounce those words. It has been advised in Bhagavatam in those 10 selected stanzas that were given by Narada to BVRC in the first canto of chapter. That is the basis of Srimad Bhagavatam as we find it now. Speech should always concern the higher. It should be about the absolute truth. That is, should not be about anything else. It is dedicated upwards. Vak means words, but words engaged in the service of the highest are known as Urdhva Vak. Urdhva Vak means words which can elevate us. It may be bereft of the glitter and charisma. That's okay. But as long as the words are about the absolute truth, elevate us. That is the most important thing. Here is Tatastha. Below is matter. And on the upper side is the Swarupa Shakti, the internal higher potency of the Lord. Urdhva Vak means connection with the internal potency of the Lord. Like that. So this is what Srila Bhakti Rakshak Sridhar Swami Maharaj about Prajalpa. Any quick comments, discussion points, questions before we move on to the fourth obstacle, which is Niyamagraha? Anything anyone would like to share as add? Questions, comments, discussion points? Okay, if there is none, then I think we will move ahead. We have 20 minutes. Okay, I did say that I will share the links. Some of you or many of you may already have those links, but I am sharing my number in the chat box. For those of you who may need the links, you can personally write to me. I will share those links with you. So you can note down the number. So this I said about links about Harinam and Madhurya Kadambini, which has subject matter about blaspheming Vaishnavas, which we have discussed in great detail. So for those who might want additional subject matter to hear on this, you can just send me a short message and I will share the link with you. Okay, so that brings us to the end of this discussion on the third obstacle, which is Prajalpa. So Atyahara, Prayasascha, Prajalpa. 3 things we have discussed. We will now move on to the fourth obstacle because we still have 20 minutes time and there are no further discussion points or questions. So I think we can move ahead to the next topic. So the fourth obstacle is what is called as Niyamagraha. So what is Niyama agraha or niyama agraha. Right? We will see. So niyamagraha is of two types. Right? You can divide it. You can do the samas in two ways. So niyamagraha is niyama plus agraha, or it can be niyama plus agraha. Okay. Both have different meanings, but both are unfavorable. Niyama means rule. Agraha means to reject whimsically. Whimsically reject the rules. Agraha means to get absorbed only in the rules and not in the essence. Both are unfavorable. Both are unfavorable. Niyama agraha. To become so absorbed in the rules that you forget the purpose of those particular rules. This is called as to become very punctilious, very pakka about following the nitty-gritties of the rule, that you forget or you don't try to understand what is the real purpose of those rules. Right? And agraha means to think, I am beyond rules. I am beyond rules. I don't need to follow rules. Rules are for neophytes. I am a very advanced person. So this is what the this is what is the Sahajiyas do. They think that, the rules and regulations are for Vaidhi sadhakas. We are actually Raganugas. So, so this is the problem. So he says, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur says, niyamas or rules are of two kinds. Vidhis are prescriptions and nishedas are prohibitions. There are two kinds of rules. Prescriptions and prohibitions. The do's and don'ts. The do's are the prescriptions and the don'ts are the prohibitions. Whatever is enjoined as one's duty is a prescribed rule. Whatever is enjoined as restricted is a prohibited rule. Both are rules. Both kinds of rules are auspicious for living entities. Conditioned souls are eligible to attain a very exalted position from a very low position. So the conditioned souls can go from a very low position to a very exalted position. To a very exalted position. Rather, it should be this way. A very low position to a very exalted position. Okay. Between these two positions, there are many other positions. 1, 2, 3, 4, right? Each position is a gradual step. Each position is a gradual step. Each gradual step is a distinct level of advancement. Right? Of course, here Maharaj says it's a distinct level of advancement. It's not so distinct in the sense it's a more gradual transition rather than a distinct transition. It's not like today you sleep being a person in Anartha Nivritti stage and tomorrow you get up being at the stage of Nishtha. It's not so distinct like that. It is a gradual transition, but nevertheless, there is sense of distinctness in it also. So, so therefore, he says that each and every gradual step has different prescriptions and prohibitions. So he says, step 1 has a particular level of particular prescriptions and prohibitions. Step 2 has different. Step 3 has different, and step 4 has different. Of course, there may be certain rules and prohibitions which are common to a few steps, but then there are many things which are different also. Whenever a living entity steps to one level and stays there, he is obliged to follow the prescriptions and prohibitions of that step. Okay. Whenever he goes from 1 to 2, he has to follow the do's and don'ts of this stage. And he should be willing to give up the do's and don'ts of the previous stage. Okay. By following those enjoined prescriptions and prohibitions, one becomes eligible to attain the next step, right? So if one perfectly follows the do's and don'ts of second, then he becomes qualified to go to third. Okay. Many times people think, I don't have any inclination to do the do's and don'ts of second, so I'm qualified for third. No. It's not a question of whether we have an inclination to follow the do's and don'ts of one stage. It's not about our likes or dislikes. If it is a prescription in terms of and an inhibition of that particular stage, we have to follow it. Only that will make us qualified for the next stage. If one is unable to attain the next step, he falls down to a lower step. This is called degradation, right? So one perfectly follows stage 1 and becomes qualified for stage 2. But at stage 2, he does not follow the rules. And he tries to follow the rules of stage 3. Then what happens? Then he does not definitely become qualified for stage 3. And he loses the qualification for stage 2 also. So he falls down actually. So this is called degradation. Attaining the higher step is called advancement. To properly follow the precepts of one's own level is called one's prescribed duties or steadiness in one's own position. So whatever position one is in, one should strictly follow the rules and regulations of that stage only. This could be, this ladder could be, Sakama Karma Yoga, Nishkama Karma Yoga, Jnana Yoga, Ashtanga Yoga, or this ladder could be Anartha Nivritti, Nishtha, Ruchi, Asakti, Bhava, and Prema. Anything. Okay. Each one of these steps have particular prescriptions and prohibitions. One has to one has to be very scrutinizing to follow the particular prescriptions and prohibitions of that particular stage that he is in. That is very important. So he says, steadiness in one's own position is piety, and deviation from one's position is impiety. Sve sve adhikare yanishta saguna parikirtitah viparyayastu doshasyat ubayo resha nischayah. Krishna tells Uddhava in the 11th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. Sve sve adhikare yanishta saguna parikirtitah. Right? Okay, we are going to see it in the next slide. There is no other piety and impiety than this. Okay. pious act and impious act are not universally defined. Pious act and impious act are defined based on one's adhikar or qualification. Okay. For a Kshatriya, to kill is a pious act. To not kill on the battlefield and show some false type of compassion on the battlefield is actually impiety. Whereas for someone else, it may be, whereas for someone else, it may be for a Brahmana. If he kills, it is impiety. Because it is not according to his adhikar. So piety and impiety, let's not call it piety and impiety. Appropriate and inappropriate actions are not universally defined. There is no universally defined appropriate action. There is no universally defined inappropriate action. Appropriate and inappropriate are defined based on one's adhikar. One's adhikar and prescriptions. If one follows the prescriptions according to his adhikar or qualification, it is glorious. If one is not performing the prescriptions according to his adhikar or qualification, it is inglorious. So glorious actions and inglorious actions are, so this is the, so glorious act means there is a match between qualification and prescription and appropriate prescription. Okay. Inglorious act means mismatch between qualification and appropriate prescription. In fact, this is a universal principle. This is a universal principle. So therefore, we cannot talk about dharma. Dharma means prescriptions. There cannot be a discussion on dharma without a discussion on adhikar. It makes no sense because dharma is according to adhikar. So if you don't know someone's adhikar or qualification, there is no question of speaking about prescriptions or dharma. So you may say that, oh, follow dharma. Well, what is my dharma? What is my dharma? For that, you have to understand who are you? Who are you? What is my adhikar? Unless one knows one's adhikar, there is nothing called universal dharma. The only universal dharma is bhakti only. There is nothing else which is universal. So people speak so much about dharma, but they speak very little about adhikar. This is where the problem comes. People end up totally confused actually. Therefore, in the Srimad Bhagavatam, Lord Krishna spoke these instructions to Uddhava. So what those instructions are, we will discuss it next time because we just have a couple of minutes for some final thoughts, comments, questions, anything anyone would like to share, ask, add. We just have a couple of minutes left. Anything? Anyone would like to ask, share? I will wait for a few seconds. If you want to just formulate your thoughts or formulate your questions, and raise your hands. I will wait for a few seconds just in case. Yes, Janaki Mataji.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, Danat Pranam.
Dandavat.
Prabhuji, the question was, we just said that we if are unaware of our adhikar.
Mhm.
And so my question was on that, on the same lines, that under the conditioned state, one is subjected to different modes of material nature. And when the consciousness is low, and therefore the adhikar itself is not known to the jiva. So under influence of passion or ignorance, they do things probably intentionally or unintentionally which are inglorious or adharmic. And therefore, as a sadhaka, even on this path, this happens with many of us.
Correct.
So then, how do we understand this, Prabhuji?
Well, what I would suggest is, Mataji, if you can join next week on time and ask this question, I would like to take this question as the first discussion point. We will start our discussion from this question because this needs a little elaborate discussion, and we are left with just 1 minute, so it won't be a proper justice. But I would really request you to ask this question in the next week's session, and we will very gradually address this because this is a very relevant question and we need to discuss this.
Yeah, thank you.
Right. Anything else anyone would like to share? Ask. Okay, so if there is none, then we will pause here. Thank you all very much for your patient listening and your enthusiastic participation. So we will continue this discussion next Wednesday. So thank you very much. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Srila Bhakti Vinod Thakur ki jai, Shri Bhakti Aloka ki jai. Hare Krishna. Thank you very much.